welcome to Safe and Sound, sponsored by White Mountain Fire and Life Safety. I am Kirk Webb, your host, and today on the show we have Brad Sorenson, who is the Fire Prevention Specialist for the Tonto National Forest. And I think you actually have a lot of other hats you wear too, along with that job that you do.
Yeah.
But give me a little background on who Brad is and what you're doing.
Sure. So I've been an employee within Wildland Fire Management for the U.S. Forest Service since 2012. I started my career up here on the Apache Sitgreaves. I worked here for several years. I've been an employee on the Coconino National Forest out of Flagstaff, as well as the Prescott National Forest, residing in Prescott. Currently, and as of last year, I've relocated and I work now for the Tonto National Forest. I cover the district of Mesa, and fire prevention technician is essentially the nuts and bolts of that position. Yeah.
So, you know the state of Arizona pretty well then, I would say, as far as fire and being a lead investigator and things like that on numerous fires. I mean, do you have an idea of how many fires you've ever investigated?
I honestly could not tell you. I'm not sure. I've been really fortunate. I've had the blessing of being able to respond to incidents all over the nation. So not only Arizona, but out of the state. A long, extensive history, but definitely Arizona being my focus. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a proud Arizona native, and this is definitely home to me.
Well, and it's been great being able to, I know you kind of grew up around here or lived here and started a career here, but I never really met you until now. and the reason you're here is because we actually had a Wildland fire investigation class. Correct.
So fire investigation, that's one of my primary roles in the job that I do. And I'm a cadre member. I instruct the course to qualify you to become a Wildland fire investigator. This course, it's a national curriculum that all of us agencies use, state and federal alike. The National Wildfire Coordinating Group, that's kind of our standard, our precedence for learning and certifying in certain fields. This particular course, we call it FI 210, and it's Origin and Cause Detection of Wildland Fires.
Right, and it was pretty nice being able, we had, 5-6 instructors?
Yeah, we do. Not only local Forest Service instructors here on this forest, but as well as myself. We have a really strong emphasis in law enforcement investigations through the Forest Service, which generally leads a lot of the investigations that we do. But aside from that, even here locally, all agencies that are qualified investigators have that ability to not only act as investigators, but serve as cadre and instructors as well.
Yeah, and we actually had 18 students in the class. I know a couple of them, we originally had 20, but a couple were sick and couldn't attend.
Yeah.
But 18 students, that's pretty impressive for a class size these days.
Yeah, it's a great mix too. It's all different agencies, different resources from land management, Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service. Lots of districts up here in this area, from Alpine to Heber Overguard.
Yeah, and even a couple of guys from over in, I think there's 3 guys from New Mexico.
Yeah, even out of state. Yep.
So it was a lot of fun because not only it's important to understand the whole realm of fire investigation, because it's not just something. That's what caused it right there.
That's absolutely right. And the biggest factor when it comes to understanding and identifying a cause of a fire, that it's critical when it comes to that information applied in fire prevention and education, because us folks like you and I that are actually fire prevention officers to some degree, whatever we're serving in, whether it's a national incident or just here locally, the information that we provide, we need to understand what's causing these fires. If I'm going to talk to the public about the threat of wildfire, I need to know what's actually causing it, and not based off an assumption, but based off of what I can actually find on the ground, the physical evidence.
Right. So we follow that methodology, or the scientific method, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And you're right. It's a whole, and it's can be very long drawn out. It can take days, weeks, sometimes even depending on the size and severity of the fire itself, or it could take just a matter of hours and be done.
Absolutely.
But we still, regardless of the size of whatever it is that we're investigating, every one of them, we approach it the same way.
That's exactly correct. It's irrelevant what the cause is, what the area is, what the fuels are. We apply this same systematic approach unbiasedly every time. And that's the direction of this class. That's for us to understand how this system works, how to be able to start at one side of a fire and be able to look at indicators, identify them, recognize them, and trace these indicators back based on the direction that we're reading in each individual indicator, pointing us back to an origin area.
And I know in a little bit we're going to actually kind of show some slides, and we're going to talk about them and a little bit of video. And it was nice being able to, because we had that storm come in, and it's like, oh great, now because we had planned to do a live burn and have the crews come out and divide up into small groups and then do their investigation. And that storm hit, and it's like, oh great. But then the very next day we actually were out there, the snow was mostly gone, and it was interesting how rapid the fire burned in the grasses and things like that. So absolutely,
the dynamic of fire behavior when you apply that to a wildland setting, it's impressive and usually unpredictable right up to the last minute. Just like you'd said, we had an instance where the ground had snow cover on it 24 hours prior, and a little bit of sunlight and that variable of weather that we see in Arizona as usual. Just like that, it's dry, it's windy, and it ignites.
In fact, part of the class, one of the common things that you always look at to the way the fire moved is wind.
Absolutely.
And that wind dries things out. And so it has a great influence on the way that fire is going to behave.
Yeah, it truly does. A lot of the fire ecology factors that we like to use and study in land management, a lot of times you'll hear us refer to something like a burn index. And the levels of the way fuels burn, we can actually calculate that and see what it's doing on fine fuels, on grass. So for example, a burn index, it can vary day to day, and it can be impacted very heavily by just wind alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that I kind of, when I look at this kind of stuff and I'm doing that investigation, I'm really trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to take from this to educate the public so maybe we can not have it happen again. And that's kind of how I view things. And
absolutely,
being that public educator, that's, I like that part of the job. And so,
yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of that in what we all do on the Forest Service side as well. That public education and fire safety, it's a large aspect of my job, and a large aspect of just being a resident in this state.
Absolutely. We want to preserve what we have to be able to enjoy nature, because granted, the White Mountains are a beautiful place to be. So now we're going to watch or look at the pictures and discuss the different things that the students are learning, and even a little short video of one of the fires that we set. In this picture, it looks like getting all of our investigators that are, I guess we call them investigator trainees, right?
That's right.
So getting that initial instruction on, first see what you got, and then so going through the whole process of what they need to do to be able to do a fire investigation.
Yeah, being in part of this class, it's a long duration of a lot of classroom orientation, and we're covering a lot of information. But what we're seeing here in this image is we do live fire field days where we take students out from the class, and we're going to introduce them to what it looks like to go through the actual process of a fire investigation, or an origin and cause determination, which is the actual terminology of this, and what it looks like to do that in person, and help them and walk them through that as a first-time orientation. Individuals in this photograph, what you see is they're on one particular side of this fire. They're not making entry into the fire because we're going through this process of elimination. That's a scientific method that we have to go through, and it's very meticulous, and the process of it is very slow. We have very certain entry points and very specific things that we're looking for, and being able to show these items to the students in person, that's what we're looking at here.
And that's kind of why they're on the outside edges of this fire, because we want to try to maintain the integrity as much as possible before we get inside and start.
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of the material that you find, as you can imagine, inside a burn, a lot of this stuff is ash and sensitive material. It's burned down to carbon, so it's going to be fragile. And that being said, before we can just go right in and start looking at this stuff and putting hands on, it's a very slow and systematic approach so that we can preserve that evidence. In this particular image, we're about halfway through the process of identifying items that we're looking for inside this fire scar, and you can see individuals that they've followed their scientific methodology, this long process that we go through where we can enter a fire area, look for indicators and identify them, and then use those indicators no different than a hunter would be tracking animal. We're looking on the ground and finding these indicators, and it's giving us a specific direction to follow back to an origin area. That's what we're seeing here.
So the different colored flags are specific. It's kind of like a language for investigators.
It absolutely is. We have a variety of different colors, and they represent different things. So as we're in this investigation area and we're locating and identifying different items, different indicators, it's almost its own language in itself, and we're laying down these little flagging indicators that helps tell us a story once you put it all together.
And you know, in this picture you can see there's several investigators, but that's not always the case because there's been numerous times you've actually been the only investigator on a fire. But
yeah, that is true. A lot of these wildland incidents that we all respond to, not all of us are fire investigator qualified. This is a pretty rigorous course that we go through to be certified, as well as a long curriculum of trainee material that we have to pass in order to be qualified as an expert in wildland fire investigation.
So you actually have a task book, through the Forest Service and CWG. Did I get that right? NWCG. Yeah, I was dyslexic. That's okay. But yeah, that and they have a task book that you go through before and that's part of that certification process.
Yes, that's correct. It's a long, drawn out process to go from a trainee status into a qualified status, and it's a very useful tool, and also that helps us keep more than one investigator on any given fire. We get to work together a lot. We get to share ideas and share concepts and help each other grow in this field.
And that was one of the things I really liked about being in the class, is that networking, being able to, because it's not like we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's just expand from there and make it work and work together.
Yep. As we're going through this investigation process, as you can see, a lot of this is very small items on the ground, stuff that we refer to as micro indicators. And so when we get into these situations, it's very common for us to be down to the ground really low, hands and knees, even magnifying glass type investigation work here, where we're looking at the smallest, most minute details of fire behavior and still being able to identify it and mark it and create a pattern.
Yeah, and they've identified that there's like 11 indicators that we're looking for to be able to track this back.
Yeah, that is right. We've gone through a long systematic process of identifying the way that we investigate fires, and this is a long, rigorous, tested process that has been updated and evaluated over many years. And so as we've constantly maintained this methodology, not only as our agency does, but as all agencies that utilize this in land management, we've been able to take this list of items and categories that we're looking for and stick with the stuff that truly works, that's tried and tested. And when we can narrow it down to a very specific category like this, then we can apply that, and it makes sense to all of us, and we're all doing the same. This video that's playing out here, what we're looking at is an ignition source that's in relatively what we would identify as a campfire. This is a controlled burn. We do have resources on scene that as we provide this live burn for this course. However, there's a lot of takeaways here. What we're looking at is essentially an abandoned campfire or an unattended campfire. As you can see, the fuels around that campfire have not been cleared away in a 3-foot diameter the way that we require that to. And if you watch as this video progresses, that flame is gonna exit and creep in between those rocks, exit that campfire ring, and start to establish in the grasses in the adjacent area. And something else to keep in mind here is this particular burn. This is one day after a pretty major snow event. 24 hours prior to this video, there was snow on the ground in this area. So that should kind of give you an idea of just how flammable some of these wildland fuels, like these grasses, how flammable they really are.
And to look at those flame lengths, just from a simple stand of grass, we're getting some significant flame lengths, and it's moving pretty rapidly.
As this fire progresses, it's gonna build heat. It's going to continue to generate that energy release as that heat increases. And as you can see, once it gets to this point, it's already beyond control from any just regular individual. If you have a shovel and a bucket of water, as you're supposed to with a campfire, already at this point, less than a minute in, you've lost the ability to control that fire. Another thing to consider that really impacts fire behavior is aside from wind and fuels, is topography. We're looking at this fire burn on just open, flat ground, and this grass is not very tall, it's not very thick, but you can see how aggressive it can still burn.
Once again, Brad, I want to thank you for joining me on this Safe and Sound show. It's, this is something I think we both have a passion of making sure that we can help preserve and to enjoy our beautiful White Mountains, and not only there, but especially because you've gone out of state, and there's so many cool things throughout our United States of America that we need to preserve, and this is one small component of being able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It's great to be here, great to work with all the same folks that I've known over the years. I love coming back to this area. It's a second home to me. So thanks again for having me. It was a pleasure not only doing this show, but going through that entire course and all of the conversing we've done over the last week.
All right, well, thank you, Brad, and thank you for watching, and join us on our next show of Safe and Sound.